as the legendary surgeon, the moment I announced I was putting away my scalpel and stepping off the operating table for good, the entire surgical department erupted in excitement. They even threw a celebration. But only Serena White, the intern, Mark brought in Faye, the one hailed as a once-in-a-generation medical prodigy. Faye approached me, a look of unease on her face. Dr. Chen, even though you've made a few mistakes in your recent surgeries, your skills are still there. We need you, and so do countless patients. She spoke with such earnestness. If I hadn't been the one involved, I might have actually fallen for it. I turned and walked away, my face expressionless. In my past life, she was an intern who followed me into surgery. But every time, right in the middle of an operation, my body would suddenly go out of control. And every time Serena would step in, taking over and flawlessly completing the surgery. After a few such incidents, she became the medical genius everyone praised, while I was branded a fraud, someone who stole her reputation. Desperate to prove my true capabilities, I took on a world-class complex surgical case. Despite immense pressure, I spent sleepless nights researching materials, searching for similar cases and developing a surgical plan. But the moment I confidently stepped into the operating room, my body once again betrayed me. Serena flawlessly completed the surgery again, and her surgical plan was exactly identical to the one I had meticulously devised. She became the miracle worker everyone talked about, and I became an incompetent quack, scorned by all, unable to bear the blow. I ended my life with the very scalpel I once mastered. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the day Serena first arrived at the hospital. The patient suddenly had a massive hemorrhage, and our Dr. Chen was so scared, she just froze. Good thing Serena was there. Otherwise we would have been in big trouble. And she still calls herself a legendary surgeon. Doesn't she feel any shame always acting so high and mighty? Well, now with Serena, a true genius, as a comparison, how can she even show her face in the operating room again? Familiar mocking voices yanked me back to reality. That's when I realized I had been reborn. Ignoring their taunts, I rushed straight to neurology for a full body checkup. The results, as expected, showed I was perfectly normal. I suspected Serena was the source of the problem. To test my theory, I immediately scheduled another surgery. This time, I refused to let Serena into the operating room with me. The surgery started smoothly, but at the most critical moment, my body once again went out of control. Just then Serena, as if she had predicted it, quickly walked in and finished the rest of the surgery. Coming out of the operating room, Dr. Thompson, the vice dean, called me into his office and said to me with grave concern, "Valerie, have you been too tired lately? How about I give you a few days off to rest? You don't have to worry about the hospital. I think that young woman, Serena White, is quite good. She's handled these last few surgeries beautifully. You're not getting any younger. Perhaps it's time to consider taking a step back and enjoying your well-deserved retirement." I stared at Dr. Thompson, my former mentor and teacher, in disbelief. He should know my capabilities better than anyone. Was even he losing faith in me now? My eyes instantly welled up. "Teacher, even you don't trust my skills anymore." Seeing my distress, Dr. Thompson sighed deeply. "You're my student, of course. I know your level. It's just considering your performance in these last few incidents. I think it's time for you to step down." I left the vice dean's office utterly devastated and returned to the surgical department. Everyone was gathered around Serena, asking her for advice on emergency solutions for unexpected surgical complications. She was confidently explaining everything, holding nothing back. But what she was saying was, all the experience I had accumulated over many years. How is this possible? I had painstakingly summarized these insights from thousands of surgeries, never formally teaching them to anyone. Everyone murmured in envious admiration. "Serena, you must be a legendary medical genius. You've only been in a few surgeries. You can anticipate so many emergencies and handle them so perfectly. Is this truly the difference between people?" Just then, Mark spotted me through the crowd, a sneering smile twisting his lips. "Serena is the real genius. Unlike some people who, after performing so many surgeries, still get scared and lost when a patient bleeds heavily. I don't know how she still has the nerve to call herself a surgical maestro." Serena looked over, following his gaze, her eyes brimming with undisguised triumph. "Mark, don't talk about Valerie like that. She's still your wife after all. I came here to learn from Dr. Chen, not to steal anything from her. But since I have a talent for surgery, I should make good use of it to save more patients." Her words earned her a chorus of praise and applause. Initially, everyone had been skeptical of Serena's medical genius. But as she successfully performed one critical rescue after another, they gradually became convinced. Even the hospital's top management held her in high regard, giving her priority for training. She became a miracle worker, sought after by all. husband and colleagues who once flocked around me, had all abandoned me to fawn over Serena. I could understand this. After all, in such circumstances, following Serena would easily grant them more resources and compensation. Serena, you're too generous. Dr. Chen can't even compare to you. In the last surgery, she was afraid you'd steal her thunder and deliberately kept you out of the operating room. In the end, didn't you have to clean up her mess anyway? Exactly. When I asked her for anything, she wouldn't say a word, claiming she could only teach me if I encountered it during surgery. I think she just didn't know how and was brushing me off. Serena, you're the future hope of our surgical department. We're all counting on you. I coldly watched the group of people in Serena, who was surrounded by them. In my past life, it was this kind of betrayal that pushed me to end my life with a scalpel, and in doing so, I had only cleared the way for Mark and Serena reborn. I would take back everything that was mine. I silently turned and walked away, not returning to the home I shared with Mark. Instead, I went back to the apartment I had bought before we got married. I couldn't understand where things had gone wrong, but one thing I was certain of, this whole situation was connected to Serena. Even if she was a so-called medical genius, it was impossible for her to come up with such detailed emergency protocols without extensive practical experience. More importantly, every time she took the spotlight, my body would suddenly go out of my control. What exactly had Serena done to me? As I thought this, a name suddenly flashed in my mind. Yes, that's it. I could tell him what was happening to me. Maybe he would know how to fix it. I quickly found his phone number and dialed it directly. He answered quickly. I thoroughly explained the strange things happening to me and Serena's abnormal behavior. He pondered for a moment, then said he would give me an answer in 3 days. He advised me to avoid contact with Serena during these 3 days. With his assurance, I felt much more at ease. I immediately requested a week's leave from the hospital. I had planned to relax for a few days, but while I was avoiding Serena, she seemed determined not to let me go. On the third morning of my leave, Mark suddenly called me. His tone was incredibly hostile as he demanded, Chen, why didn't you tell me you were taking leave? I had no patience for him anymore. What does my leave have to do with you? Mark, on the other end of the line, paused, surprised, but it was only for a second. Then he irritably ordered me, never mind that, get to the hospital now. I scoffed. I'm on vacation. If you need something, find someone else. With that, I decisively hung up. I lay back down on the bed, just about to drift off to sleep again. Suddenly, someone started pounding loudly on my door. At the same time, they were shouting my name. I looked through the peephole. It was Mark and Serena. I didn't want them to disturb my neighbors, so I irritably opened the door. Mark, what do you two want? Seeing the door open, he grabbed my arm without a word and started pulling me out. I forcefully shook him off. Are you out of your minds? If you have something to say it here. Otherwise, I'm calling the police. Mark's face turned livid. You're coming back to the hospital with me now? There's a surgery today that only you can perform. I looked at him, his expectations so blatant, and burst out laughing mockingly. Isn't Serena a medical genius? Why doesn't Faye go? Why call me? Mark's face was filled with impatience. Chen, I'm giving you one last chance. Are you coming back to the hospital with me or not? No, I refused. Cold and decisive, he let out a cold laugh, clearly infuriated. You're forcing my hand. Then he pulled out his phone and shoved it in front of me. A video clip was playing on the screen. In the video, a woman was trying to hand me an under-the-table payment, which I refused. The next second, she burst into tears, kneeling and kowtowing repeatedly in front of me. I remembered this incident. The woman's son had suffered a sudden cerebral infarction, and I had saved him after the surgery. The woman wanted to give me a bribe, to thank me for saving her son's life. When I refused, she immediately knelt down and cowed out. I looked at Mark, confused. Why are you showing me this? Mark's lips twisted into a challenging smirk. Don't be so hasty. Just keep watching. The video clip ended, and the woman who had cowed out to me appeared on screen, dressed in ragged clothes. She tearfully accused me in front of the camera. It was this doctor, Chen, who caused my son to be paralyzed. She refused to operate on my son because she thought my bribe was too small, making us miss the best time for treatment. But I truly couldn't afford more money. It's my fault for being useless and harming my son. The video ended there, and Mark threatened me with a cold sneer. If you don't come back with me obediently today, I'll post this online and completely ruin your reputation. I looked at Mark in disbelief. I never imagined he would stoop to such lengths to frame me. All for Serena, fine. I'll go back with you. Since you want me back so badly, I'll humor you. Just don't regret it later. The moment I stepped through the hospital entrance, Dr. Harrison, the head of surgery, grabbed me and hurried me inside. Valerie, you're finally here. We just got a car crash victim with an intracranial hemorrhage and an unruptured aneurysm. This is a complex case and you're the only one in this hospital who's ever done this specific procedure. Get ready quickly. I asked for the patient's detailed condition. For now, their life wasn't immediately at risk. I looked at Serena, who was about to change into scrubs, and calmly stated, Dr. Harrison, you know my recent situation. I'm really not suitable for surgery right now. Dr. Harrison heard me and seemed to recall something, a flicker of hesitation crossing his face, but he couldn't think of anyone more suitable than me. Seeing the sweat forming on his brow, I tentatively suggested, Dr. Harrison, don't rush. I can find someone to come over. We should still have enough time. At this, Serena, whose face had been full of anticipation, turned pale. Without waiting for Dr. Harrison to speak, she hastily objected. No way. Both Dr. Harrison and I looked at her. Her expression was a little unnatural. What I mean is the patient might not be able to wait. Since Dr. Chen is here, let Dr. Chen do it. Dr. Harrison looked at me somewhat hesitantly. Valerie, why don't you just go ahead? Before I could even speak, Serena's eyes turned red with urgency. Dr. Chen, I know you're still angry with me, blaming me for stealing your thunder. But you really can't just stand by and watch someone die. As she spoke, her eyes welled up with tears. Seeing her cry, Mark's face filled with distress and he glared at me, his expression even darker. Valerie Chen, that's enough. I never knew you were such a cold-hearted person. Just go and perform the surgery obediently, and let Serena be your assistant. I looked at him coldly. How am I cold-hearted? I know my own condition. I'm not suitable for such a complex surgery right now. And I already said I would find someone to replace me for this operation. My words left Mark speechless. At this point, Serena suddenly burst into tears and knelt before me. The surrounding nurses and passing doctors stopped in their tracks. Whispers immediately broke out. Serena's performance was masterful. She had positioned herself as the humble, bleeding heart student, painting me as a petty, egotistical monster willing to let a traumatic brain injury patient bleed out over a bruised ego. Mark stepped forward, his face twisted in righteous fury. He reached down to gently help Serena up, glaring at me as if I were a piece of trash. Look at her, Valerie. Look at how much she cares about the patients, while you stand there calculating your own fame. If you don't scrub in right now, I swear I will release that video to the press before the hour is up. Dr. Harrison wiped the sweat from his forehead, clearly overwhelmed by the drama but desperate for a surgeon. Valerie, please. We are losing time. I looked down at Serena. Her face was buried in Mark's chest, but from my angle, I could see the reflection of her eyes in the glass of the nearby supply cabinet. There were no tears in her eyes. There was only a ravenous, predatory hunger. She needed me in that operating room. Without me, she was nothing. I checked my watch. 9:40 a.m. You're right, Dr. Harrison, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. The patient doesn't have time, which is why it's a good thing my replacement is already here. Right on cue, the heavy double doors of the surgical wing swung open. A tall man in a tailored charcoal suit walked through, pulling a sleek, silver medical briefcase behind him. His presence instantly shifted the gravity of the room. He had sharp, hawkish features, prematurely graying hair at his temples, and eyes that looked like they belonged to a predator assessing its prey. I was told there was a complex intracranial hemorrhage paired with an unruptured aneurysm. The man said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that silenced the murmurs in the hall. Where is the patient? Dr. Harrison blinked, his jaw dropping slightly. Dr. Elias Thorne? Is that you? Gasps rippled through the older staff members. Elias Thorne was a phantom in the medical world. He was a pioneer in neurosurgery and neurocybernetics, a man who had famously left clinical practice to run a shadow research institute in Switzerland. He was the man I had called 3 days ago. The one and only, Elias said briskly, not slowing his stride. He stopped beside me, giving me a curt nod. Valerie, good to see you. I trust the ore is prepped. Or 3. I replied smoothly. I'll show you the way. Wait. Serena's voice cracked, genuinely panicked now. She tore herself away from Mark, her carefully crafted facade slipping to reveal frantic confusion. You can't just bring in an outsider. This is against hospital protocol. Dr. Chen is the attending on call, she has to. Elias paused and turned his icy gaze toward Serena. And who are you? Serena White. Surgical intern. She puffed up her chest slightly, regaining a sliver of her false bravado. I've been handling the critical emergencies lately. An intern, Elias repeated, the word dripping with aristocratic disdain. He looked at Dr. Harrison. Harrison, since when do you let interns dictate surgical assignments for Class 5 cranial traumas? Or has this hospital degraded into a daycare since I last visited? Dr. Harrison flushed crimson. And no, Dr. Thorne. We've just had some staffing dynamics. Your presence is an honor. Please follow me to or 3. Mark grabbed my arm as I turned to follow them. His grip was bruising. What the hell are you doing, Valerie? Who is this guy? You're going to let someone else take this? I told you what I'd do with that video. I leaned in close to Mark, lowering my voice so only he could hear. Post it. Let's see how well it holds up when I show the police the bank statements of you transferring $50,000 to that woman's brother the day before she filmed it. Mark froze. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost. I didn't actually have the bank statements yet, but I knew my husband. He was sloppy. If he bribed someone, there was a paper trail. His reaction just confirmed my theory. I yanked my arm out of his grasp. Don't ever touch me again. Leaving Mark paralyzed in the hallway and Serena staring after me with pure, unadulterated hatred, I followed Elias to the scrub room. The surgery took 4 hours. I didn't scrub in. Instead, I stood in the observation gallery alone, watching Elias work. He was a machine. His precision was terrifying. Down in the OR, Serena had somehow managed to get herself assigned as a secondary assistant, standing near the back. I watched her closely. Throughout the entire surgery, she looked lost. When Elias demanded a specific clamp or asked a complex question about the patient's rapidly fluctuating intracranial pressure, Serena stammered, entirely unable to keep up. The medical genius was suddenly nothing more than a deer in headlights, eventually relegated to holding a suction tube in silence. Because I wasn't the one holding the scalpel, her source of genius was cut off. When the surgery was successfully completed, Elias met me in my private office. He locked the door behind him, closed the blinds, and set his silver briefcase on my desk. She's a fraud, Elias said without preamble, loosening his tie. Her anatomical knowledge is textbook at best, and her surgical intuition is non-existent. When the aneurysm began to leak, her heart rate spiked and her hands shook. She didn't know what to do. The prodigy is a parasite. I know, I said softly, sitting on the leather sofa. But how is she doing it? Every time she shines, I lose control of my body. It's like my brain shuts off and my limbs go numb. It happened in my past life, and it's happening now. Elias stopped. Past life? I hesitated. I hadn't told him about the rebirth. It sounded too insane. A figure of speech. I mean, in my past surgeries. How is she stealing my skills? Elias popped the latches on his briefcase. Inside was a piece of equipment that looked like a cross between an ultrasound machine and a military radio. When you called me and described your symptoms, temporary motor aphasia, localized paralysis, combined with someone else simultaneously exhibiting your specific muscle memory and decision-making, I knew it wasn't a biological disease. It's technological. He pulled out a wand attached to the machine. Sit up straight. Pull your hair up. I did as instructed. Elias ran the cold, metallic wand along the base of my skull, down my cervical spine. Beep, beep, beep. The machine let out a sharp, continuous whine when the wand passed over the C4 vertebrae. There, Elias said, his voice grim. He handed me a mirror and angled a desk lamp toward my neck. I looked in the mirror. Hidden beneath my hairline, virtually invisible unless you knew exactly where to look, was a tiny faded scar no bigger than a mosquito bite. What is it? I whispered, a chill crawling down my spine. A neuromimicry shunt. Military grade, highly illegal, and highly experimental. Elias explained, packing the wand away. It taps directly into your central nervous system. Under low-stress environments, it's dormant. But when your cortisol levels spike, say during a critical moment in a surgery, it activates. It intercepts the efferent motor signals from your brain. That's why your body freezes. Your brain is giving the command to move your hands, to make the cut, but the signal is being swallowed by the shunt. And Serena? The shunt doesn't just block your signals, it broadcasts them, Elias said, his eyes darkening. Short-range frequency. Serena is wearing a receiver. Probably an earpiece or a transdermal patch. When your brain fires the exact sequence of how to handle an emergency, the shunt transmits that neural data to her. It effectively temporarily overwrites her own motor cortex. She becomes a puppet, executing your genius. I felt physically sick. The betrayal was so profound it made the room spin. In my previous life, I had died believing I was losing my mind, believing I had lost my edge. I had killed myself out of shame. But it was a theft. A literal hijacking of my body and soul. Who put this in me? I asked, my voice trembling with rage. It requires a local anesthetic, a specialized injection gun, and about 20 minutes of unconsciousness, Elias said gently. Who shares your bed, Valerie? Who has access to you when you take your sleeping pills? Mark. Mark, who always made me tea before bed. Mark, who pushed so hard for Serena to join my team. Mark, who was now blackmailing me to ensure I kept feeding Serena my life's work. Can you take it out? I asked, my hands clenching into fists so tight my nails cut into my palms. I could, Elias said. But the moment I do, the signal stops. They will know you've found out. They'll destroy their receiver and play the victim. You'll have no proof, and Mark will release whatever blackmail he has on you. I looked up at Elias, a cold, calculating calm washing over me. In my past life, I was a victim. In this life, I was a surgeon. And I knew exactly how to excise a tumor. You don't just cut it out. You destroy its blood supply, you isolate it, and you rip it out by the roots so it can never grow back. I don't want you to take it out, I said, a dark smile pulling at the corners of my mouth. I want you to hack it. Elias paused, a slow matching smile spreading across his face. Now that is the Valerie Chen I remember. What do you have in mind? They want me to be the puppet master? Fine. But it's time to change the script. For the next 2 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I returned to the surgical rotation. I acted cowed, subdued, and broken by Mark's blackmail. I allowed Serena into my operating room. Just as before, at the most critical junctures of the surgeries, my body would seize. The familiar, terrifying numbness would wash over my limbs, and I would be forced to step back. And just as before, Serena would step forward, her eyes glazing over slightly as the receiver fed my neural pathways into her brain. She would perform the delicate suturing, the rapid clamping, the brilliant unorthodox maneuvers that only I knew. The hospital buzzed. The genius intern had become a legend. The Vice Dean Dr. Thompson actively encouraged me to take an early retirement, suggesting that Serena was the future of medicine. I swallowed the humiliation with a bowed head, fueling their arrogance. Mark grew bolder. He moved out of my apartment, officially renting a luxury penthouse with Serena, paid for by the massive bonuses the hospital was throwing at her. He didn't even try to hide the affair anymore. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Elias and I were working. Elias had developed a localized frequency jammer and a feedback loop device that fit into a standard hospital pager. We spent nights in his secure lab, mapping the specific frequency the shunt used to transmit to Serena. I also hired a private investigator to track down the woman from Mark's blackmail video. It took 10 days and a lot of cash, but we found her. She was living in a dilapidated apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. When my PI presented her with the evidence of Mark's bank transfer and threatened her with federal extortion charges, she broke down. We recorded a full unedited video confession of her admitting that Dr. Valerie Chen had saved her son, and that Mark had paid her to lie and ruin my career. The pieces were in place. All we needed was the stage. The opportunity arrived on a Tuesday. The hospital was thrown into chaos when a massive motorcade surrounded the building. Senator Robert Sterling, a frontrunner for the upcoming presidential election, had collapsed during a rally. The MRI results were a nightmare. A massive, deep-seated cavernous hemangioma wrapped tightly around his brainstem. It was a ticking time bomb. One wrong move, a millimeter of error, and the senator would either die on the table or wake up a prisoner in his own body, locked in forever. Dr. Harrison called an emergency board meeting. Every top surgeon in the hospital was present, alongside the senator's intimidating security detail and personal physicians. It's inoperable, Dr. Thompson said, sweating profusely as he looked at the scans on the projector. The risk of brainstem damage is 95%. If he dies on our table, this hospital's reputation is finished. We have to transfer him. He won't survive a flight, the senator's lead physician barked. He needs surgery now. Who is your best? Who has the lowest mortality rate? The room fell silent. Everyone looked at me. But before I could speak, Mark stood up. My wife, Dr. Chen, is officially the senior surgeon, Mark said smoothly. But as you all know, she has been struggling with nerve fatigue lately. However, her protege, Dr. Serena White, has successfully taken over our most critical cranial surgeries over the past month with a 100% success rate. The senator's physician looked at Serena, who was sitting at the edge of the room, looking pale but ambitious. An intern. A prodigy, Dr. Thompson corrected, eager to push the responsibility off his own shoulders. She has an intuition for neurosurgery that defies logic. She is our miracle worker. I kept my eyes down, hiding the ice in my gaze. They were setting Serena up for the ultimate glory. If she saved the senator, her career would be untouchable. She would be a national hero. Serena stood up, taking a deep breath. She looked at me, a smug, victorious sneer flashing across her face before she turned to the senator's men. I can do it. But I need Dr. Chen in the room with me. She grounds me. As my mentor. She needed her battery. She needed me in the room to hijack my brain. Fine, the physician said. Prep the ore. We will have a live feed broadcasting directly to the boardroom, so our medical team can monitor every move. Do not fail. As the room dispersed, Mark grabbed my shoulder. You know what to do, he hissed in my ear. You get in there, you get her to the brainstem, and you let her take over. If you try anything, if you let that senator die to spite her, I will ruin you. I looked up at him, my expression perfectly blank. Don't worry, Mark. Today, everyone is going to see exactly what Serena is capable of. The observation gallery was packed. The hospital board, the senator's team, and Mark all stood behind the glass, watching the OR below. The red light on the camera blinked, broadcasting the feed to the boardroom. In the OR, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. The senator's skull was open, his brain exposed under the harsh glare of the surgical lights. I stood at the operating table, the microscope pulled down over my eyes. I was holding the micro-scissors and bipolar forceps. Serena stood directly across from me, scrubbed in, her hands hovering, waiting for her moment to shine. In my breast pocket, hidden beneath my scrubs, rested the modified pager Elias had built. Approaching the hemangioma, I said, my voice steady, broadcasted over the OR intercom. Through the microscope, the tumor looked like a tangled, pulsating mass of angry purple grapes wrapped around the delicate, ivory stalk of the brainstem. It was the most difficult presentation I had ever seen. Even for me, it was going to push the absolute limits of my skill. Cortisol levels spiking, the anesthesiologist noted. I could feel it. The adrenaline. The focus. And then right on cue, the sickening cold sensation at the base of my skull. The neuroshunt was activating. It was trying to sever my connection to my own hands. Dr. Chen is freezing. I heard Dr. Thompson murmur through the intercom from the gallery. Serena, get ready. Serena stepped forward, her eyes taking on that familiar, glassy look as the receiver hidden beneath her surgical cap synced with my implant. I'm taking over, Dr. Chen, she said confidently, reaching for my instruments. I didn't step back. Instead, I flexed my right hand. I tapped my elbow against my side, pressing the hidden button on the pager. Click. The feedback loop engaged. The jammer didn't just block the signal. It took the vast, complex, high-stress neural data my brain was producing, amplified it by a factor of 10, and fed it back to Serena along with a burst of pure, chaotic white noise. Serena's hand was an inch from the scalpel when it happened. She let out a blood-curdling shriek. She violently jerked backward, crashing into the instrument tray. Scalpels, clamps, and metal bowls clattered loudly to the sterile floor. Serena collapsed onto her knees, clutching her head, screaming as if her brain were being ripped apart. My head. Make it stop. Ah, she wailed, thrashing on the OR floor, tearing at her surgical mask and cap. The OR erupted into chaos. Nurses screamed. The anesthesiologist jumped back. What's happening? Dr. Harrison yelled from the gallery intercom. Get her up. The senator is bleeding. Serena's thrashing had knocked the table. A tiny vessel near the tumor tore. Blood began to well up rapidly, obscuring the brainstem. The monitors began to scream. Beep 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 beep. BP dropping. We're losing him. The anesthesiologist shouted. Serena, get up and operate. Mark screamed, his voice cracking with panic over the intercom. He slammed his fists against the gallery glass. But Serena couldn't hear him. She was curled in a fetal position, vomiting violently onto the floor. Her nervous system completely overloaded by the jammed signal. She was a broken doll. The prodigy was dead. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at the gallery. I simply adjusted my microscope. The coldness in my neck had vanished. My hands were entirely, beautifully my own. Suction, I commanded. My voice cut through the screaming and the alarms like a whip. The scrub nurse, paralyzed by fear, didn't move. I said suction. I roared. The nurse snapped out of it and thrust the suction tube into my hand. I didn't wait for Serena. I didn't wait for anyone. I descended into the surgical field. My hands moved with a speed and precision that defied human limits. I was a maestro conducting a symphony of life and death. I clamped the bleeder in less than 3 seconds. I navigated the perilous geography of the brainstem, teasing the tumor away from the delicate cranial nerves millimeter by millimeter. In the gallery, there was dead silence. The screaming over the intercom had stopped. They were watching a master at work. They were watching the real Valerie Chen. For 2 excruciating hours, I didn't blink. I didn't sweat. I systematically dismantled the hemangioma, cauterizing the feeders, preserving every single vital neural pathway. Tumor is out, I finally said, dropping the mass into a specimen jar. Hemostasis achieved. Vitals are stable. The anesthesiologist stared at the monitors, then at me, his eyes wide with awe. Heart rate is 70. BP is 120/80. He's perfectly stable. Dr. Chen, that was. I've never seen anything like that in my life. I stepped back from the table, peeling off my bloody gloves. I looked down at Serena. She was conscious now, slumped against the wall, pale, shivering, and covered in her own vomit. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with primal terror. She finally understood that she had played a game she could never win. I looked up at the gallery. Mark was staring at me, his face a mask of absolute horror. Close him up, I told the junior resident. I turned and walked out of the operating room. When I entered the boardroom, the silence was deafening. The senator's team was furiously typing on their phones, clearly relaying the success of the surgery. Dr. Thompson, Dr. Harrison, and the rest of the board sat frozen in their chairs. Mark stood near the back, his hands shaking. Valerie, Dr. Thompson stammered, standing up. That was phenomenal. But what happened to Serena? She had some kind of seizure? Before I could answer, the door swung open. Elias Thorne walked in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. She didn't have a seizure, Elias said, his booming voice filling the room. She experienced a localized neural feedback loop, brought on by the malfunction of an illegal signal receiver she was wearing under her cap. Mark lunged forward. This is a lie. Valerie, you set her up. You poisoned her before the surgery. I told you what I would do, Valerie. He whipped out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. I'm posting the video. Your career is over. I calmly walked to the head of the boardroom table and plugged a flash drive into the projector laptop. Go ahead, Mark, I said. But I think everyone here might find my video a bit more interesting. I clicked play. The projector screen lit up, not with the heavily edited blackmail video, but with the high-definition confession of the woman Mark had bribed. Her tearful voice filled the room. He paid me. Mark Chen paid me $50,000 to lie on camera. He told me if I didn't say Dr. Chen ruined my son, he would make sure my son never got his physical therapy funding. Dr. Chen saved my boy. She is a saint. Mark is a monster. The video cut to screenshots of Mark's bank statements, highlighting the transfer of $50,000 to the woman's brother's account. The boardroom erupted. Mark, what is this? Dr. Harrison yelled, stepping away from him as if he were radioactive. It's a deepfake. Mark screamed, spit flying from his lips. He pointed a trembling finger at me. She's crazy. She's losing her mind. Arrest her. Actually, one of the police officers said, stepping forward with a pair of handcuffs. We have a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Chen. We received a tip regarding unauthorized bodily modification, medical espionage, and extortion. Elias stepped up, placing the medical scanner on the table. Mark Chen drugged his wife and implanted a military-grade neuroshunt into her cervical spine. This device hijacked her motor functions and transmitted her surgical expertise to Serena White, allowing an incompetent intern to masquerade as a prodigy, while simultaneously destroying Dr. Chen's physical autonomy. Dr. Thompson collapsed back into his chair, clutching his chest. The senator's lead physician looked murderous. You allowed an intern to use a stolen brain to operate on the next president of the United States? I will see this entire hospital burn to the ground. No, please. Mark sobbed as the officers wrenched his arms behind his back and slapped the cuffs on his wrists. Valerie, tell them. Tell them it's a mistake. I'm your husband. I walked up to him until we were inches apart. I looked into the eyes of the man who had driven me to suicide in my past life. I felt no anger anymore. Only the cold, sterile satisfaction of a surgeon who had just successfully excised a malignant tumor. You're right, Mark, I whispered so only he could hear. I did lose my mind once. I even died for it. But not this time. Enjoy prison. As they dragged Mark screaming from the room, the door opened again. Serena was wheeled in on a stretcher by paramedics, on her way to the psychiatric ward for evaluation. She looked at me, her lips trembling. Dr. Chen, she whimpered, reaching a shaking hand toward me. Please teach me. I just wanted to be like you. I looked down at her. Medicine isn't a parlor trick, Serena. It's blood, sweat, and decades of sacrifice. You wanted the glory without the grind. Now you have nothing. I turned away from her, facing the hospital board. They looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. They were the ones who had enabled this. They were the ones who had cast me aside the moment a shiny new toy appeared. Dr. Chen, Dr. Thompson pleaded, his voice trembling. We didn't know. You must stay. We'll make you the chief of surgery. We'll double your salary. You saved the senator. You are the heart of this hospital. I reached up to my collar, unclipped my hospital ID badge, and tossed it onto the polished mahogany table. It landed with a sharp clack. I'm afraid I have to decline, Dr. Thompson. My resignation is effective immediately. But where will you go? Dr. Harrison asked, stunned. I looked at Elias. He was waiting by the door, a faint, proud smile on his face. Dr. Thorne and I are opening a private neuro research and surgical institute, I said smoothly, walking toward the exit. I have a piece of illegal tech in my neck that needs to be surgically removed, and then I have a lot of real medicine to practice. If you ever need a consultation, my secretary will let you know my hourly rate. The surgical suite of the Thornton Institute in Geneva was entirely made of glass, overlooking the snow-capped Alps. It was a far cry from the claustrophobic, politically toxic halls of my old hospital. It had been a year since the incident. The fallout had been spectacular. Mark was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for medical espionage, assault, and extortion. Without my brain to guide her, Serena failed her medical boards miserably. The neural feedback loop had caused minor, permanent synaptic damage. She developed a tremor in her right hand that ensured she would never hold a scalpel again. Last I heard, she was working as a receptionist at a podiatrist's office, constantly bragging to patients about how she used to be a surgical prodigy, though no one believed her. My old hospital faced massive lawsuits from the senator's office and was stripped of its level 1 trauma status. Dr. Thompson was forced into early retirement in disgrace. As for me, Elias successfully removed the shunt from my neck. The surgery took 6 hours, and when I woke up, the first thing I did was hold my hands up to the light. They were perfectly steady. They were entirely my own. I stood at the sink in the scrub room, letting the warm water wash over my hands. Outside the glass, the snowy peaks glowed under the morning sun. Elias stepped up to the sink next to mine, pumping a mound of antiseptic foam into his palms. "Ready, Dr. Chen?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "We have an awake craniotomy on a pediatric patient. Very delicate. I'll be your assistant." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. I thought of the past life, of the cold steel of the scalpel I had used to end my own pain. I had been reborn into a nightmare, but I had cut my way out of it. I dried my hands on a sterile towel and pushed backward through the doors. "I'm always ready, Dr. Thorne. Let's go save a life."